Hello everyone and welcome to Sinful Gaming. Hope you're all doing well, hope you're all staying safe, and most of all, I hope you're all fighting that war against the grey. Today we've got a special video, and first of all I'd like to give a shout out to Mr. AoS Coach for nominating me for what I'm about to do, the I Am A Wargamer challenge. This is a challenge where YouTubers from around the world that are wargamers have gone about talking about how they've got into the hobby, some advice for YouTube and where they'd like to see their own channels go. It's a great way to sort of get content creators out there connected with each other and get you, the audience, connected with content creators, learning that a little bit more about those people that you watch. Right, so I've got a couple of questions that for this particular thing that I'm going to answer, and let's get straight into them, I guess. So to start with, we're going to shrink down this little icon here. That should be better. To start with, the first one is, how did I get into wargaming? So my wargaming journey started when I was probably about 8 or 9. Now, a little bit of background, my parents were never married. I never really knew my dad, but all of a sudden he came into my life, and I started going over to his house on weekends, and I would meet my cousins there. And my cousins would come and play with me, and we'd do all sorts of things, run about, throw balls with each other and all that. But this all changed when a family member came around and gave us a copy of HeroQuest. We were always like board game players. We used to play things like Cash Flow and Monopoly and lots of different board games, Scrabble, all that sort of stuff. Nothing too fancy, but like we enjoyed playing like games like that together. It was much easier to do that than, say, share a single PlayStation, when many games back then were only one player, and we only had one controller. So we would play board games together and stuff like that, and eventually we got given a board game called HeroQuest. Now, we'd had no idea what this was, but it was pretty cool. I've always been a sort of fantasy first sort of person. I enjoy a lot of fantasy stuff. I've always, read more fantasy side novels, so things like Del Toro Quest, David Eddings books when I got a bit older. Lord of the Rings definitely was a big thing when I was young. As well, and even things like Harry Potter, I guess, is more on the fantasy side than anything as well, and all those things I sort of enjoyed more. I liked fantasy stuff, and so we got playing HeroQuest, and I picked the elf. One of my cousins would play the wizard, and the other one would play the dwarf. We'd never have a barbarian in the party. And we'd play this for hours and hours, making up our own missions, following the book sometimes. And that was sort of, I guess, my first little toe dip into wargaming. But properly getting into Warhammer didn't start till probably a couple of years later. I got some pocket money one week, and so my two cousins that I'd previously been playing HeroQuest with, their dad got married for a second time, and then we had another cousin around our age. I'm the youngest of the four where I grew up, and this is sort of going to be the group that I started playing with mostly and grew up playing Warhammer with. So I was the youngest, only by a year over one, and then the two oldest were actually the same age. And we all... So he brought home one day, something his dad had bought him was a model from a store. And this store happened to be a Games Workshop, so me and my cousins were like, oh, wait, we've seen this Games Workshop before on HeroQuest. Because HeroQuest has Games Workshop logo on it. And we're like, oh, we've seen this before. Well, we're really interested. So we went up to a local Games Workshop store, which was Games Workshop, Tea Tree Plaza at the time. And as soon as I entered there, I was just completely blown away by it. I had my first paint lesson at the time. They were doing Lord of the Rings models, so I had a Last Alliance elf that I got to paint up. That was you can see a common thing here, elves are my thing. And so that was the first time, and then on my way out, I was looking at armies. I'm like, what do I really want to get? And so my first little pickup was the old metal Wood Elf Dryads. There was cheapest blisters back when the blisters were like alphabetized, and you had you'd go look on the wall at a like chart, and you'd see like what your number corresponded to, and they were there was two of the cheapest figures that I could purchase with the money I hadn't spent on lunch that day. So it was either them or a Skaven Globadier, and well, that happened later, but the first models I picked up were two Wood Elf Dryads, two of the old, not particularly great looking Dryads, but I thought they were really cool at the time. Wood Elves just drew to me. I've always been a fan of like, I guess, elves in general, and I like very generic looking elves. I like elves in forests. So the tree people really spoke to me. From Lord of the Rings, like Treebeard was one of my favourite characters or favourite things in the movies. And I also like Gwahir, so the Eagles and Warhawk Riders especially just drew me into the Wood Elves. But there was an issue. At the time when I started, Wood Elves did not have an army book. There was no book on the shelves. There was very little models in there. And so over time, I didn't really pick up many more models. My cousins started playing. Two of them split a starter set. They split the Empire and Orcs and Goblins one, where you got the little cardboard cutout of a watchtower. And then for one of my other cousin's birthday, he picked up Lizardman. And it was this time I was still going and seeing my dad every couple of weekends. And eventually he sort of bought me the start of a Skaven army. I got a box of clan rats, a rattling gun, and the Skaven book, and that was the start of my first army. Because I would say, like, while Wood Elves were my first models, they were not my first army. And so I picked up Skaven. And from there, I grabbed another box of clan rats. I started picking up blisters of storm vermin every couple of weeks. When I got some pocket money, I'd go in with $18 and pick up a blister of storm vermin. I was probably, 12, 13 at the time of doing this, just at the end of, just the start of high school. I think that time is. Excuse for a sec. And just started amassing my Skaven army. I picked up some Night Runners. In a White Dwarf, they gave you Dogs of War rules for taking giants in your army. So I got one of the giants for my birthday. I still have that same giant today that I had back then, which is really cool. I don't have many of those Skaven anymore. They were all the old, very monkey-looking rats. But yeah, and so that was my first tip in it. And then, of course, we started playing lots of games because we'd have Empire and Lizardmen versus Orcs and Goblins, and Skaven would be the same battle over and over again. And we would win a lot of the time, mainly. Me and my cousin who had Orcs and Goblins, we just sort of got the game more. I've always been someone very able to pick up a game pretty quick. And so we picked up rules, and we just sort of won a lot more of the games. And when we would play each other, it would probably be the best games of Warhammer I would have at that age, because I'd be playing my cousin who normally, if we were on a team, we always won. And so during high school, money sort of dried up. I don't come from a particularly rich family. There's a lot of children in my family as well, so Warhammer sort of did take a backseat. I'd get a new box every birthday and Christmas or something like that. It's all I'd want for birthdays and Christmas. And my pocket money would be spent on blisters, picking up Skaven Globadiers and Storm Vermin blisters. But eventually, when I got my first part-time job, I went back into a games workshop, and Skaven had just been re-released at the end of 7th. And this was when I really started to have a lot of money to be able to fund the hobby, and so I just went nuts, splashing a ton of cash on a brand new Skaven army, getting rid of all my old terrible monkey rats, and getting those fantastic new sculpts, and just getting a Hell Pit because it was the coolest thing around, I thought at the time. Still do think it's one of the coolest models. I've got one there sitting in box now that I need to build and paint. This is all making me want to go back and paint my Skaven, really. And get that army on the channel and paint it up. But yeah, from there I started going into playing fantasy a lot. And eventually Wood Elves also had their release as well. The 2006 Wood Elf release, I'd been picking models up from time to time for that, but really, because a lot of their range was metal and a lot of the key components of Wood Elf army was metal, it wasn't until this time that I'm like, cool, I've got a good Skaven army, now I'm just going to jump head first into this Wood Elf army that I could never afford before, because a blister of Eternal Guard was $18 and you needed like 60 of them in an army, because they were the only battle line foot troop that could fight in any sort of battle. So I ended up picking a unit of 30 of them, and Treekin and a Tree Lord and Warhawk Riders, Way Watchers, War Dancers, all that sort of stuff, all the things I could never afford before. And at this point, my part-time job had also turned into an apprenticeship for a chef. And while funds, I guess, did drop, I still managed to get what I needed, and was able to buy my own Warhammer at this point now. And so I pretty much stuck with Skaven and Wood Elves as my two armies. I dabbled a little bit in Beastmen, Dwarves at points during Warhammer Fantasy, but never really sort of connected on either of them, especially Dwarves. I got a Dwarf army and then literally got rid of it. But yeah, Wood Elves and Skaven were the two I finished out Fantasy with, especially my Wood Elves. When the 8th edition Wood Elf release hit, I bought, not only did I have my pre-order come in at my local store, but then I bought the entire store's worth of stock, except all the Araloft spares they had. I bought all the Tree Lords, all the Eternal Guard, Wild Riders, everything that was on shelf. I'm just I want it all. And so I just got everything for that army and went nuts going on Wood Elves. And then, of course, we played out 8th, and eventually End Times came. And I was really digging the End Times. I liked the story. I was really cool. I was really shocked at the end when the old world had died. But then Age of Sigmar came out, and I guess at the start, most people, there were a lot of bitter people within the hobby, and so I sort of, I never sort of left, never got into the Age of Sigmar right at the start, mainly because the local hobby store at the time was doing a massive 40k campaign, and so that sort of took priority for me. So that went on for a good year and a half, and I never really got into AoS that much. Then around the General's Handbook came out, I'm like, oh, this is a cool release for AoS finally. And we had a look at that, and we're like, all right, cool, let's start doing some AoS campaigns and playing with that. And so that's when I really started getting into AoS properly. And picked up my old Wood Elves, and I would play some games against them, mostly against my good mate Kron from Aethercast, the legendary Cancron himself, and some other friends as well. Jason Tipping from Having a Good Time. Don't know if he still puts anything out on his channel, but anyway, we would all just sort of play and have some fantastic games in stores with all these different armies. My Wood Elves, or Wanderers as they were now called, and eventually moved over to Stormcast as my main force. And then it wasn't till a couple of years ago now that finally I sort of got out of, I guess, the Stormcast part after a few events, and I went, right, I want to do something different. At the time, LLV was doing all these stats, and I'm like, I want to make something my own. And so I picked up the Scourge Privateers and made a full 2,000 point army of Scourge Privateers and took them to CanCon, which at the time, the one I went to, was the largest event in the world, only beaten by the CanCon this year. But that's pretty much my story of getting into AoS. Most of the rest you'll find out if you watch the channel nowadays, any more recent stuff. But I think I've rambled on with that one enough for a little bit, so we'll get on to question number 2. Where do I want my channel to go? And so I'm going to say the same generic thing that I think most people have said when I've watched others' videos of this, and that, I guess the dream for any content creator is to be able to do this full time. There's, you'd be lying to yourself if you said, that wouldn't it be cool if, I could do this full time as a job. For the reality, it's probably not going to happen for most people, and probably not going to happen for me. However, I enjoy what I do. And where do I want the channel to go? I want the channel to continue growing, obviously. but I really want to push like my favorite style of gaming, which is narrative wargaming. I enjoy the lore. I enjoy playing thematic battles, and that's not to say I don't like competitive. I don't think competitive and narrative have to be wholly separate things. I can be a good player while playing a narrative game. Like, there's nothing wrong with doing really good maneuvers and playing really hard and really well in a narrative game, because like a general doesn't half try in a narrative situation in your stories, so you should be trying as hard as you can. But yeah, so I want to continue the channel to grow, push narrative wargaming, show that there's more to narrative than what people think, that narrative doesn't just mean playing without points or whatever. Like, it's narrative has, I guess, some people have a bad understanding of what narrative means. Like, I can go to a tournament and play narratively, if that makes sense. In fact, I have all my games, my Scourge Privateers, marked out on like how they went at different events, and all these games I've played, and I've built that into my story of my Scourge Privateer force. And these are games like at some like quite a high competitive level, playing some really top players, which is awesome. And so that's really where I want the channel to go. I want to push narrative wargaming and showing that narrative wargaming can be more than what I guess people see it as on the surface. And of course, wanting the channel to grow. I'd love to potentially hit 2,000 subscribers by the end of the year. I mean, we hit 1,000 this year, but now the channel's just grown and grown, and I don't think it's potentially out of reach. I mean, I wouldn't be disappointed if I didn't hit it, but it would be really cool if we could hit 2,000 subscribers by the end of the year. I think that would be an amazing thing to be able to do. But that's where I want it to go. And so question 3 is advice for new wargaming YouTubers. So my advice for anyone thinking of getting started on YouTube, Twitch, a blog, whatever it is, a Facebook page, anything like that, is just do it. Like Nike says, just do it. You've got to pull the plug, and okay, you might think like, oh, but I want to wait till I've got a better camera. Oh, I want to wait till I've got something else, this thing that I need, or I want to wait till this other thing. Just do it. The more you keep adding all those hurdles in front of you, you're never going to get started, because there'll always be something more you can think of to make your content better. It's better to get yourself out there and improve on the job than never start. And there'll be those people who like can get everything ready and then start, and that's great. But for the vast majority, I would say you just need to get going. And I mean, this first stuff on my channel was not very, I guess, how to explain it? The first one, like, wasn't very professional, wasn't the greatest thing or anything. It was actually blogs about me wargaming and painting and stuff while I was dealing with my first child being born. But I just started doing it, and then I started doing other things, and it's blown up to where I now do battle reports, which I've always wanted to do. I'm doing Black Library reviews, and just more and more narrative content that I think people seem to be enjoying. So yeah, my biggest advice for anyone wanting to get started is just do it. And most importantly, not just do it, but do it for yourself. People won't always like everything, and you can't appeal to everyone at the same time. There will be people who only care about seeing competitive stuff. There'll be people who only care about listening to some lore. There'll be people who only care about what you're painting and how you're painting it. And I think you need to have an idea of where you want to go. Have that idea, and focus in on that. Don't worry about trying to broaden your own net. Just keep your path and keep your that light that you have at the end, that spark that got you to start this going. Keep that the same. Don't try and make it bigger, because you'll end up extinguishing the light there. That there's no actual end point for you, or no point that you're striving towards. But most of all, just enjoy what you do and just do it. Just get started if you're thinking of doing it, and enjoy what you do and do it for you. Now we're coming to the last bit of the video though, and I've got to do my own shout outs. So I'm going to give some shout outs to a couple of channels of my choosing. Alright, and so my 3 picks to do the I Am A Wargamer challenge are the following. So first of all, I'd like to get Circus 36. I'll link all these channels down below in the link description so you can go check them out and await their own responses to the I Am A Wargamer challenge. But Circus 36, is a member of my Discord. He's got his own channel. He does some cool hobby content on there, and in general is a really great dude who, thanks to just being on my Discord, I've got to know him a lot, and I really do like all the hobby he brings out and shows the world. So definitely go give him a like and a subscribe, and keep an eye out for his response in there, and I can't wait to see your response as well, Circus. Next up, I've got Razortree Gaming. He's a good mate of mine from across the sea. He is, in general, just a great dude. We actually met on a couple of the different forums, and we've done a couple of videos together for different things, and he's just a great dude. Some cool bat reps, some other little cool tactical videos that he puts out as well, and definitely go give him a check out as well. And lastly, to my good friend Mr. Cron and all your buddies there at Aethercast, if they wish as well, I like to challenge you guys as well at Aethercast, the Caradron Overlord podcast by Caradron Overlords. So that's all my picks for this. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope this has got some people thinking. Definitely go give a like and subscribe to all 3 channels that I mentioned. They're all fantastic channels, and you should definitely help support them. But that's it from me today. Thank you so much for listening to this. I hope you've enjoyed me rambling on about my own self. I mean, I like doing that, but you know, stay safe everyone, stay well, and most of all, keep fighting that war against the grey. I'll see you all again real soon. Ciao for now. So, we hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to leave a comment, like the video, and subscribe to the channel to see more from us in the future. Also, a special shout out to everyone who supports the channel on Patreon. Thank you to our Sinful Guard Militia, Christian Weir, Philip Ward, Cowspawn, Soren, our Freeguild Regiment members, James and AJC. Thank you all so much for your additional support. If you'd like to support the channel on Patreon, you can do so by clicking the link down in the description of the video. And also, you can find there a link to our Discord server. You can come chat with me, ask things about what you'd like to see on the channel, or in general, just chat with the great community we have there. But that's it from us today. Stay safe, stay well, and most of all, keep fighting that war against the grey.